That other one. This is Electrical Test 7. And this is basically one I got from the Mobile Air Conditioning Society handouts, pretty good stuff. And it's just generic. Tapping on parts to see if they start working again is an acceptable procedure.
Oh, yeah.
Depends on the part, right? I'd say yeah. I mean, why not? You know, just tap it and see if it works. How many times have you done it with a starter? Just tap it to see if it works. You know, I read one magazine article a long time ago that says when it comes to electronics, you can't make them work with a hammer. Well, sometimes hitting them does. Of course, I will tell you there was a little test on some of the old mass airflow sensors on Chevrolets, and they says the way you would see if it was bad or not is you'd whack it with your knuckles, and if it changed the way the engine ran, you knew it was a bad sensor. You know. What are the 3 power relays controlled by the body computer? Now that's a sort of a generic question that was put on there. You would need to be putting off, crank run, ignition run, accessory. It depends on the vehicle, basically, but let's go with those 3 right now.
Crank, accessory, and
yeah. Off, crank run, ignition run, and accessory. Now what you got here, what you need to do on just about any car that you're working on is you need to make sure that you do a study of the wire map so you can find out what controls what. It's really important to do that, because if you don't understand the system, and I'll tell you something else, when you're going into some kind of a system you haven't worked on before, going to the description and operation page is sometimes very wise, because you'll find stuff that you never knew about how that system operates. If you're pulling a trouble code or something, like if you've got a code like they were talking about on the thing I showed you a while ago, and you want to go in there and you say, why? What is it looking for, and what causes it to set this code? So I'm going to look it up in description and operation, or look at the description and operation of the code, and it says, if the PCM sees this for more than a certain amount of time and the voltage drops below that, then it's going to set this code. You're going to say, well, it gives me a pretty good idea where to look for this. I don't know at the times it's helped me do stuff like that. The in-car temperature sensor should be cleaned with an approved aerosol spray and a lint-free cloth. No, 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 no. All that, just be careful with that. On GM hybrids, a blue harness means medium voltage and an orange harness means high voltage.
True.
Yeah, the blue harness is going to be your lower voltage system, like, you know, some of the Chevy trucks had the one that starts and runs, it's got a generator starter system on the front of it, and basically it's a big old belt that's hooked around the front of the crankshaft. It's kind of like a golf cart. When you stop, it just sits there and not idling, and then when you go to take off, it starts up automatically, you know. On the list the 3 best ways of finding a bad terminal connection if you don't have a suitable terminal to test the pin fit. Now, I'm always talking in here about how if you get this nice little pointy tapered test slat and you want to make sure you get a good connection, and you ram it down in that terminal and you spread the terminal out so that it doesn't touch anymore, you got big trouble. And somebody that's really good at fixing stuff that works on cars all the time will be looking at pin fit. Sometimes when I was fixing some of the cars back in the 80s, when the fuel injections first became rampant on all these cars, and I was working at the Ford dealer, but we also worked on Jeep and Chrysler stuff and other things too. I would get these, the engine controller harness had little pins in it in those days when it was a 60-pin controller like that Bronco's got on it. And the pin is not a full circle, it's actually a little split thing, and it's supposed to slide over that the pin in the engine controller nice and hard. But when people had been probing those things, they would spread them out, and all of a sudden you got an engine controller that can only half read some of its inputs, can't actuate some of its outputs, doesn't have power on some pins. And one of the things I'd do is pop the little red wedge out of that connector, and I'd go through there with a little pick tool, and I would tweak every terminal and pinch it down good and tight. And you'd be surprised how many cars I would fix that way. Just tweaking all those terminals so that every one of them had a good nice pin fit, especially if it was giving some screwball problem. It's kind of crazy. And a lot of times, you know, that'll make the difference between the guy that fixed the car and the guy that threw his hands up and said, well, I hate this electronic stuff. You know, if you say that and you decide you want to walk away from it, you're not doing well. There was a recall program. There's a difference between a recall and a program. A program expires with time or miles. A recall is forevermore. So this program that we had, there was some issues with these Ford Tempos where there was an engine controller that they wanted replaced in those things, and if they said if you reached up under there and you touched the side of the engine controller and you felt a heat sink, then you would know that one hadn't been replaced, because the new ones you put on there were smooth. And so we drew a work order. I was training this guy that was like 18. He was in the summer between, you know, right out of school, and he was walking with me, watching everything I was doing. He didn't know much of anything anyway. Well, I reached up under there, and when I touched the side of the engine controller and felt that it was you know, bumpy and had a heat sink on the side of it, I said, this one's going to have an engine controller. And he says, how am I supposed to learn this? You come out here, you look at a work order, you reach under there, a feel of the engine controller, now you're telling me it needs a computer. You know, think about that. You know, if he didn't, I didn't tell him what I was looking for, but it seemed like it was a magic trick to him. But then I took the time to explain it to him. Describe PMM, what it is and what it means. That's a power master module, and it has to do with conferencing between other modules in case the body computer fails. It's good to have a fail-safe in it. Okay, and this is not even moot anymore because who drives a Saturn anyway? Sorry. You do, don't you? I knew I'd get a look out of her. The two Saturn Aura electrical systems have what? 12 and 36 volt sides, 150 and 300 volt sides, an electric water pump, both A and C. They got an electric water pump and they got 12 and 36 volt sides. And Saturn Aura was a sort of a hybrid here. What the heck does horseradish have to do with an air conditioning system?
Smells like it.
It's used in a biocidal cartridge that attaches to some cabin filters. And I'll tell you something else. Lexus actually had, in some of their cabin filter areas up into there, an an ultraviolet light that would shine really, really bright on that cabin filter and murder bacteria that happened to be on that filter. Yeah, it was a pretty good idea they had right there. The body computer isn't in a deep sleep, isn't a deep sleeper, I'm sorry, and it, what? Does not monitor other modules during its sleep. It isn't a deep sleeper. Even despite the fact that it's not a deep sleeper, it doesn't monitor other modules while it's, you know, during its shallow sleep, so it doesn't sleep deep. Just unplugging and reconnecting connectors can sometimes repair a concern.
True.
That's true. I've seen that before, and it drives me up the wall. I'll be fighting with something, and I knew that I was closing in on the problem and all that, and then I would, you know, unplug this relay to look at some connections and all. They didn't look bad, and then plug them back in. Everything would be fixed. They used to tick me off to no end. If you're looking for an intermittent problem and you're doing electrical stuff, if it's a come and go issue, the dumbest thing you can do is jerk around on harnesses and everything and move them because you're going to temporarily fix it. And I underscore temporarily. If it straightens out and it leaves and you hadn't really done anything to fix it, but you charged them for your, you know, whatever you've done, like checking it and maybe half an hour to fix it or whatever, and it comes back, now you're working on it for free. The smartest thing you can do is get under there and shine you a light around and look as close as you can with your bright flashlight at everywhere you can. And sometimes you'll see where a wire harness is dragged across a sharp place or a bracket, and you can look. I've actually done that before and pulled it back and seen copper. You know what I mean? If you're really, really careful. Now, if it's an intermittent problem, don't fool around and wiggle the harnesses a lot. That's a bad idea.
So we need 5, 6, and 8.
Oh, you didn't get those?
You talk too fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you guys are supposed to be listening even if I talk really fast. You got to process it, of course. Anyway, you can use a multimeter. You can use a scan tool trouble code. You can use a jumper wire bypass. And some people say you can take a set of numbered drill bits. And you need to know which number fits just perfectly into the terminal you're doing. I like to use, you know, every tool at my disposal, no matter what it may be, to figure out what it is that's causing, you know, loose terminal fits. There's another thing that I talk about sometimes in electrical stuff. If you're working with sensor circuits that are only have a tiny little whisper of voltage through it, you know, then you're going to be worried about even connections that look good can be bad. So be particular about that. Sometimes we solder the crimped part of it, of the connector, to make sure that if you do solder it, though, stand it up so the solder won't run up in there and keep it from plugging in. Power Master module is PMM. It has to do with conferencing between other modules. What was the other one you were slack on?
Hold on.
Did you get rattled about the Saturn Aura?
No, you talk too fast.
Well, don't sugarcoat it. Tell me how you really feel. Hello. Hey, man. Okay. Yeah, well, now go ahead and give me a hamburger with a bun. I think I'm going to start moving in that direction, like I got yesterday and everything. And I'm going to finishing up a lecture, but I should be ready to go in a few minutes. All right.
8.
What's that?
8.
Well, we're going to. You got test 8 or test 9? Which one you got?
Number 8.
Oh, number 8. I'm sorry. What the heck does horseradish have to do with the air conditioning system? It's used as in a biocidal cartridge that attaches to some air filter. Biocidal means it kills bugs. and bacteria and stuff.
Did it kill bugs and bacteria?